but he did record some of his own songs, but in those days, people didn't think like they do now. I better write the songs I'm going to record because that's going to make me really rich. You know, you made money out of touring. You didn't make money particularly out of the record sales or the writing sales. And you know, as we all know, that if you look through who wrote certain songs back from the 20s, blues singers, jazz people, it's very often there's some strange names on those songs, and it turns out to be the producer or the guy from the record company who owns the copyright. You know, there's Peer Music. Ralph Peer was the A&R guy for RCA, but he ran his own publishing company. He was switched on to how to make money, but performers didn't. But I don't think, you know, I guess Louis saw himself as a performer first. And
there are definitely different traits to composing and performing.
Yeah.
You know, some people are just performers, or great performers, and then some people are great composers. But to do both, it's actually really, really hard to do. I mean, I do both, but it's hard.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have to say, okay, I'm going to put the horn away right now and just kind of deal with this compositional aspect.
Yeah.
Another question I had was, like, within his career, of course it was blossoming beyond belief by the time he did this, but High Society, what kind of effect do you think that had on his career?
I think it kicked him into another level. I think that took him from being in a more jazz-orientated world into a much wider world. People saw that on the movies. It was a huge movie. You know, Sinatra and Crosby and Grace Kelly. How could I mix the two up? Grace Kelly, and they saw that movie, and they saw him as a different kind of performer. And it wasn't before and after, but I think he went to be more of a general entertainer after that than he was previously. He was more of a jazz.
Right.
He never lost his jazz, obviously, but I think that was probably slightly. It definitely widened his appeal.
Yeah. In the film High Society, how many black performers were in that film? Was he the only one in that film?
I think there was probably, like Hollywood at the time, was always most black performers or most black actors were butlers or whatever, weren't they? And he definitely helped move it out of there. I mean, he hadn't done a number of movies by this time, and mostly they'd been in the stereotypical kind. And he did, a couple of years before he did New Orleans with Billie Holiday, who was very upset that she was being made to play a maid in the film, and was very vocal about it. She was also managed by Joe Glazier.
Oh, was she?
Yeah. So that's, but that, I think it helped to take him from being more of a stereotypical role into being, okay, he was still a musician, but there was no question the camera loved him in that film.
Yeah. Do you think? Well, how did that whole film possibility come up? Did they just say, okay, we want Louis Armstrong because there's only one Louis Armstrong? They didn't audition to just to say, okay.
No.
Like, how did that happen?
It may well have been his friendship with Bing Crosby, because he'd been friends with Crosby for a long time by this point, and that may have been Crosby's doing.
I had heard, I don't know if this is true, but I had heard that Bing Crosby was, I think possibly it was Bing Crosby was the one who kind of pushed the idea. And actually, they really didn't want to deal with having a black musician in the film, and it was one of those things where Bing Crosby, because of his belief in Louis Armstrong, I could see him because he was really tight with Louis.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
and I could see that happened.
I mean, they both recorded for Decca, and they did all those things together, and there was an affinity between the two of them. And you can see it with Sinatra too, because he'd already known Sinatra by that time as well. But I think you're right. I think Crosby probably had the say in that. And then afterwards, of course, he did stuff with Sinatra, did various TV shows, and you can always see an empathy between them all.
That's great. What about Ella Fitzgerald? Because those recordings that he did with Ella, man, really good recordings. Great. And you could tell there's just like a synergy there that it definitely went beyond just the recording? How did they actually meet?
It's through Decca again.
Oh, it's through Decca.
Yeah,
Okay.
there was a guy who ran Decca Records, Cap, who he had two things that he held dear to his heart. There was a sign up in the studio which basically said, "Always follow the melody." You know, for him, the melody was everything. And if you listen to Louis's recordings on Decca, they were always about the melody. You know, he was always about the song. And I think the other thing that he liked to do was to put his big artists together, which is why he recorded with the Mills Brothers. He recorded with the Polynesian band. He recorded with Ella. That was when he first recorded with her. They wouldn't have probably known each other. I mean, they may have met on the road, I guess, when she was with Chick Webb and then running Chick's band after Chick died. But I think that's when they first met. And there was undoubtedly a chemistry there, wasn't there? I mean, I think those are the greatest duets ever. Bar none.
Yeah, I agree.
And just the way he, you know, Ella Fitzgerald, for me, is the greatest female singer of the 20th century. Any century. Her voice. If she had been more beautiful physically, she would have been the biggest singing star ever in the history of singing stars. But as it was, she just had the greatest voice. She could sing the telephone book, couldn't she? And it would be beautiful.
Yeah, it was.
But when they did it together, you know, Mr. Gravelly, and he would come in and weave in and out of the melody and sing those counterpoints, and it's magical.
Yeah.
It's magical. The Nearness of You between the two of them is probably one of the most romantic songs ever. And they're both, you know, if you looked at those pictures on the cover of there's a wonderful picture, I think it's Louis and Ella, again, the second one, where they're both sitting on the cover and he's got the short shirt on and she's sitting there. And they don't look the most romantic couple, but my God, when you hear it, I think those songs are beautiful. I think
it's classic. Those are classic.
The best.
Louis Armstrong, I know he had made some statements about bebop, and I heard some other things about how he actually supported him. But I actually saw him perform with Dizzy Gillespie, you know.
Yeah.
But how did Louis Armstrong feel about the new up and coming music that was happening, like bebop in the 30s and beyond?
I mean, I think like a lot of people in any age, it's hard sometimes to see new music when it comes along as anything. To me, you know, I grew up listening to Motown, and Stax, and I loved Motown and Stax, and still love Motown and Stax. I struggle with hip hop. I like it when it. I love Trombone Shorty's new album because to me there's a mixture of the two, and it you know, they come together in a form that I can understand. I think Louis may have struggled with bebop because it just was so different. It certainly wasn't, in many cases, a lot to do with the melody in the same way, and I think it went counter to what he understood. But he did. I mean, he did play, as you say, he played with Dizzy. I mean, I think both of them probably came somewhat out of their camp and met somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe he would have. I mean, Miles has famously said that, you know, you can't play a note on the trumpet that Louis hasn't played. And there was great respect for him, but I think from his point of view, I think it was just a style of music that just wasn't to his liking.
I think he still embraced it, though.
Yeah.
When I saw that Dizzy Gillespie recording, or the Dizzy Gillespie performance on television, it's a recording, and I saw it. They're having so much fun, and they're scatting as well. Yeah. You know, and they all finding that common ground with each other.
Yeah. I mean, he wouldn't have. You know, I mean, he wouldn't have done that. He wouldn't have gone and played pure bebop because that wasn't what he did. But they found something in the middle, and it was a pretty unique thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm asking you the most controversial questions as well, man.
No. I think
this,
it's interesting too, because to me, when you listen to, I've listened to everything he's ever done. I think over the course of doing this, I mean, I think I've got 2,500 Louis Armstrong's recordings on my iTunes, and I listened to all that stuff, and you listen to it, and that's what you listen to, and that's what you think about, and because that's what he did. It's always interesting to think about what ifs. They didn't happen in the same way, but it would have been interesting if he'd have, at several times in his career, maybe, and it happens to everybody in life, you come up to, you're driving along and you come to the T-junction and you go, is it right or is it left? I'll go right. What if you'd have gone left? How different would have life been? And it's true for him. What if he hadn't have come to England in 1932? What if he hadn't have come here? Would his career have gone in a different direction? Probably it would have done. Would he have become what he did? Well, he would have become something, but it would have been different. And you can only look as the way the cards have been dealt, or the decisions have been made. And so it is interesting to what if, though.
Richard, man, we've gone through so many different aspects of Louis Armstrong. I just want to thank you for taking the time to speak about everything, his life.
To me, it's fascinating. I mean, it's a life the likes of which we'll never see again. Somebody who came from the humblest of circumstances, living in a world of intense segregation, from a city like no other. I was in New Orleans in August for the Satchmo Fest, where, as you know, they celebrate Louis's life. Yeah. And I saw there's a Japanese trumpet player, Yoshio, who runs his own Louis Armstrong kind of tribute band. He lives in Japan, and he's raised millions of pounds to take instruments to New Orleans school children because of the power of music. So you've got him. I saw the Soul Rebels playing at the Satchmo Fest. Yeah. I saw the Treme brass band playing there. I saw Tom McDermott singing a lot of Louis songs at the piano, in a totally different way. Kermit Ruffins recording with Dr. John an album to Louis Armstrong. Dr. John's doing this album. His influence is still there in New Orleans. It's still fantastic, and his influence around the world, it's never going to go away. Yeah. As long as people love good music, they will be returning, no matter what age, to Louis Armstrong records. But we'll never see a man who has probably done so much for spreading the power of good in the world through fantastic music as Louis Armstrong.
That's great. Well, we come to the end of an incredible interview with Richard Havers. We talked about Louis Armstrong, who has the highest capacity for love in music of any musician, and thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Cool. It's been brilliant.
Yeah.
Do we have to stop? Can we just do one?